You didn't lose her because you were too nice. You lost her because you were common, abundant, predictable, like a street vendor selling roses in bulk, sweet, generous, but forgettable. There's a brutal truth that most men will never accept. The more you chase a woman, the more you signal that you are beneath her. Not equal, beneath. And in the psychological language of attraction, that's the kiss of death. Why is this such a consistent mistake? Because the modern man has been trained to believe in transactional logic. If I'm kind, respectful, generous, thoughtful, she'll like me. But attraction doesn't follow that equation. That's how you get hired for a job, not how you become a man a woman can't stop thinking about. The harder you try to earn her affection, the more you communicate that her approval is worth more than your presence. And this unspoken imbalance is why she pulls away, without ever telling you the real reason. Psychologists call this the law of contrast. When something is given too easily, we instinctively assume it lacks value. When something must be earned, we attribute it value automatically. Think of it. The woman who instantly shows you affection may feel nice, but the one who makes you work, whose attention feels earned, that's the one who lingers in your mind. Flip the roles, and now ask yourself, what happens when you are the one giving everything freely, too soon, too often? The problem isn't effort. The problem is unreciprocated effort. And worse, effort driven by insecurity. That's when it reeks of neediness, the stench that repels feminine desire like bug spray. A man who needs nothing is magnetic. A man who needs her is disposable. It's that simple. Yet most men sabotage themselves without even realizing. They think persistence is loyalty, but she sees it as pressure. They think compliments are attractive. She hears them as background noise. They think texting her every day is romantic. She reads it as you being emotionally homeless, craving attention, craving validation, craving her to define you. This is why nice guys lose. Not because kindness is unattractive, but because their kindness is often rooted in hidden motives. If I give enough, maybe she'll choose me. That's not generosity. That's gambling your dignity for approval. And deep down, women can feel the difference. Real kindness doesn't demand return, but this type of behavior, constant pursuit, always does. She sees it. She senses the agenda. And even if she's flattered, she loses respect. There's an even deeper layer to this. Attraction is tied to survival. In evolutionary psychology, we're drawn to traits that signal strength, independence, and control over resources. So when a man is chasing, putting her above all else, placing her on a pedestal, sacrificing his own boundaries just to get noticed, he signals weakness in the tribe. In the primal mind, she thinks, if I need to rely on this man, will he crumble? If other women don't desire him, why should I? It's not conscious. It's instinctual. And it's fatal. Now here's the contradiction that burns your logic to the ground. The less you chase, the more you're chased. Not because you're manipulating, but because scarcity creates value. Imagine this. You walk into a luxury store. The clerk doesn't run up to you, doesn't beg you to try something on. They wait. You feel their calm presence, their confidence. That stillness makes you curious. You feel you need to prove you belong there. Now compare that to a pushy street vendor begging you to buy. Who holds the power? You didn't lose her because you were too nice. You lost her because you were common, abundant, predictable, like a street vendor selling roses in bulk, sweet, generous, but forgettable. There's a brutal truth that most men will never accept. The more you chase a woman, the more you signal that you are beneath her. Not equal, beneath. And in the psychological language of attraction, that's the kiss of death. That's you when you chase. That's you when you need her to text back. That's you when you blow up her DM. A street vendor screaming for scraps of attention. And here's where the philosophical knife twists deeper. Nietzsche once said, "What is happiness? The feeling that power is growing, that a resistance is overcome. When you chase, you're not overcoming resistance. You are surrendering to it. You make her the authority. You become the applicant. And worse, you think you're doing something noble. Look at me, trying so hard."
But the effort isn't what repels her. It's the lack of self-worth underneath it. She feels it. Women don't fall for the man who needs them. They fall for the man who moves forward regardless. But what about love? Isn't love about pursuing, showing up, proving your commitment? No, that's what codependence is. Real love, real masculine love, doesn't chase, it leads. It doesn't beg to be chosen. It chooses itself and invites others to align. Love is not about pursuit. It's about polarity. You create that polarity by being grounded, magnetic, intentional, not by being emotionally overeager. The tragic irony is that men often chase because they feel they're not enough. And in chasing, they become exactly that. Not enough. Because they showed their cards too early. Because they forgot that mystery is the fuel of female desire. Because they made themselves into a story she could predict and therefore ignore. You want to become unforgettable? Then stop trying to be noticed. Stop trying to impress her. Start living in such a way that your energy, your silence, your focus, your restraint forces her to wonder what's going on in your mind. The man who isn't trying to win her is the one she secretly wants to win.
But to become that man, you need to kill the part of you that believes love is earned through obedience. You need to bury the idea that chasing someone will make them see your worth. It won't. In fact, it does the opposite. You become entertainment, a court jester, a man who hands over his soul for a chance to be accepted. And so the fatal mistake isn't just chasing a woman. It's chasing approval, period. Because when you do, you tell the world, I'm not enough until you choose me. And that, more than any lack of looks, status, or money, is what makes you weak. The man who offers himself too easily isn't rejected because he's bad. He's rejected because he's too obvious, too familiar, too predictable. And in a world where attention is currency, the man who gives it all away for free goes bankrupt, fast. Now here's the contradiction that burns your logic to the ground. The less you chase, the more you're chased. Not because you're manipulating, but because scarcity creates value. Imagine this. You walk into a luxury store. The clerk doesn't run up to you, doesn't beg you to try something on. They wait. You feel their calm presence, their confidence. That stillness makes you curious. You feel you need to prove you belong there. Now compare that to a pushy street vendor begging you to buy. Who holds the power? You didn't lose her because you were too nice. You lost her because you were common, abundant, predictable, like a street vendor selling roses in bulk, sweet, generous, but forgettable. There's a brutal truth that most men will never accept. The more you chase a woman, the more you signal that you are beneath her. Not equal, beneath. And in the psychological language of attraction, that's the kiss of death. What if I told you that attraction isn't about love, compatibility, or even physical appearance? It's about position. Not social position in the obvious sense. Not money, fame, or status symbols. But something deeper, something primal. Hierarchy of perceived value. I in the silence between your words, in the way you walk into a room, in how you speak, respond, and delay. You are either radiating social gravity or orbiting someone else's. That is the hidden language of attraction.
And unless you understand this hierarchy, you'll always be chasing women who see you as disposable, while they obsess over men who barely notice them. Let's go deeper. In every social dynamic, there's an invisible scale of power. One person leads, the other follows. One person selects, the other hopes to be selected. And here's the paradox. The more you show that you want someone, the more you subconsciously tell them they're above you on that scale. That you're the one seeking validation. That they're the prize. This is not a theory. It's how we're wired. Evolutionary psychology tells us that our ancestors survived by forming tribes and pecking orders. At the top were the leaders, confident, calm, desired by others. At the bottom, the desperate, the reactive, the ones trying to prove themselves. Women evolved to be highly attuned to these hierarchies. Why? Because choosing a partner was a matter of survival. Reproduction with a low-status male meant fewer resources, less protection, and lower chances of offspring survival.
So what happens when you approach a woman with the energy of pursuit, of overexcitement, of please like me? She doesn't see romance. She sees hierarchy. And whether she's conscious of it or not, her brain marks you as beneath her. You don't need to be rich or famous to have status. You need to behave like you own your value. But the moment you act as if her attention is a reward, you place yourself on the bottom rung of the social ladder. This is why men who don't seem to care often get the girl. It's not that they're jerks. It's that they carry themselves as if they're the center of gravity. They speak slowly. They don't fill silence with nervous chatter. They don't try to impress. And that energy, that quiet command, triggers deep psychological attraction. Now here's the contradiction that burns your logic to the ground. The less you chase, the more you're chased. Not because you're manipulating, but because scarcity creates value. Imagine this. You walk into a luxury store. The clerk doesn't run up to you, doesn't beg you to try something on. They wait. You feel their calm presence, their confidence. That stillness makes you curious. You feel you need to prove you belong there. Now compare that to a pushy street vendor begging you to buy. Who holds the power? You didn't lose her because you were too nice. You lost her because you were common, abundant, predictable, like a street vendor selling roses in bulk, sweet, generous, but forgettable. There's a brutal truth that most men will never accept. The more you chase a woman, the more you signal that you are beneath her. Not equal, beneath. And in the psychological language of attraction, that's the kiss of death. Think of this. Have you ever seen a lion chase a mouse? Of course not. The lion doesn't need to. Its mere presence demands attention. Now flip that image. The mouse chasing the lion. Absurd, right? That's what most men look like when they chase women. Like prey chasing a predator, do we live in a world obsessed with performance and productivity, where we're told to do more to get results. But in the realm of attraction, more is not more. Less is more. Stillness is power. Indifference, not from bitterness, but from confidence, is magnetic. And here lies the uncomfortable truth. The moment you chase, you admit you're not being chased. You position yourself as the lesser. You become the candidate, not the king. And no woman dreams of submitting to a man who acts like a servant. But here's the contradiction. Many women will say, I just want a nice guy who shows he cares. And that's not a lie. They do want kindness, connection, warmth. But they want it from a man who doesn't need their approval to be whole. They want it from a man who is emotionally self-sufficient. Not from the one whose affection comes wrapped in insecurity and expectation. That's the difference between powerful kindness and performative validation. Look back at history. Cleopatra didn't seduce the most powerful men in the world by begging for attention. She created aura, not access. Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, Napoleon, all were obsessed not with beauty, but with power cloaked in mystique. The seduction wasn't loud. It was strategic, silent, and the message was always clear. You may have the world, but you don't have me, unless you earn it. In The Art of Seduction, Robert Greene breaks this down with chilling precision. He writes, seduction is about the imbalance of desire. Whoever is more self-contained, more elusive, holds the power. That imbalance is the invisible hierarchy. When you chase, you give up your edge. When you hold space and invite her in, you flip the dynamic. And yet, we resist this truth. Because it contradicts everything we've been told, that we're told that love is selfless. That to win someone's heart, we must try harder, love louder, give more. But the harsh reality is this. Love without value is pity. And pity never inspires passion. So you flood her inbox. You memorize her favorite songs. You buy flowers, leave notes, become available whenever she calls. And what do you get? A text back 3 hours later. Maybe. Why? Because in her subconscious, you are lower on the hierarchy. Contrast that with the man she's obsessed with. The one who gives her breadcrumbs of attention. The one who makes her wait. The one she can't figure out. That man is higher on the ladder. Not because he's better, but because he behaves as if his presence is the gift. That's the secret. Presence. Not pursuit, scarcity. Not availability, selection. Not desperation. So where does this leave you? With a choice. You can keep playing the bottom game. Chasing, texting, convincing, impressing. Or you can rise into a new identity. The man who invites, but never chases. The man who observes, but never begs. The man who knows that his time, his energy, his attention are luxuries and must be earned. And no, this doesn't mean being cold. It doesn't mean being manipulative or playing games. It means stepping out of the identity of the beggar. It means entering the room with the calm certainty that you belong, and that anyone who enters your world is lucky to be there, not the other way around. This energy, call it masculine leadership, spiritual confidence, or just emotional sovereignty, is the source of attraction. And when you live from it, women feel it. Not because you say anything special, but because your posture, your silence, your gaze, and your pace all whisper one thing. I am the prize. And you don't need to say it out loud. In fact, saying it ruins the magic. Because when it's real, it doesn't need to be spoken. It's felt.
Now here's the contradiction that burns your logic to the ground. The less you chase, the more you're chased. Not because you're manipulating, but because scarcity creates value. Imagine this. You walk into a luxury store. The clerk doesn't run up to you, doesn't beg you to try something on. They wait. You feel their calm presence, their confidence. That stillness makes you curious. You feel you need to prove you belong there. Now compare that to a pushy street vendor begging you to buy. Who holds the power? You didn't lose her because you were too nice. You lost her because you were common, abundant, predictable, like a street vendor selling roses in bulk, sweet, generous, but forgettable. There's a brutal truth that most men will never accept. The more you chase a woman, the more you signal that you are beneath her. Not equal, beneath. And in the psychological language of attraction, that's the kiss of death. You can't fake gravity. You either have it, or you orbit those who do. And that's the final shift. Becoming a man whose energy doesn't chase because it pulls. Not through manipulation, not through techniques, but because you've stepped so deeply into your own value that others begin to feel it before you speak. That's not charisma. That's presence. That's what it means to be the prize. And no, this isn't about acting indifferent or cold. That's still chasing, just in reverse. It's the boy pretending not to care, hoping she notices. It's an inverted desperation. But true masculine magnetism doesn't need performance. It's rooted in something real, self-selection. The moment you choose yourself, you stop needing others to validate your worth. That shift, internal and irreversible, changes how you walk, talk, move, and connect. But how do you embody this? If the last chapters deconstructed the illusion, this one builds the architecture. Because becoming the prize is not a slogan. It's a discipline. It's not loud. It's not flashy. And ironically, it's not even about women. It's about building a life that is so aligned, so full, so focused, that her attraction becomes a side effect, not the goal. So let's begin. The first strategy is energetic scarcity, not playing hard to get, but actually being hard to get. Why? Because you're occupied, not with distractions, but with purpose. Most men are too available because they have nothing else demanding their attention. No mission, no vision, no fire that burns brighter than her validation. That's why they text too often, overcommit, stay on read, and fall apart when they don't hear back. A man with no structure is always collapsing into whoever gives him attention. But when your life is already full, mentally, physically, emotionally, a woman entering it has to earn her place or be drowned out by your momentum. This isn't arrogance. It's architecture. Next, silent signals of value. These are not words. They're calibrations. How you pause before speaking. How you maintain eye contact without blinking first. How you listen without reacting. Most men rush to fill silence. The prize holds it. Most men try to validate themselves by over-explaining. The prize lets others wonder. Presence is a weapon. Stillness is strategy. And control over your emotional expression is magnetic. Why? Because in a world addicted to attention, the man who doesn't beg for it is seen as already having it. Now comes the most overlooked principle: selection over pursuit. You're not trying to be liked. You're deciding who fits. You're filtering. You're observing how she shows up. Not because you're judging, but because you've stopped outsourcing your value. When a woman realizes you're not trying to win her, but that she might need to win you, everything shifts. That's not a tactic. That's how high-value men behave. Think about it. The man with 10 offers doesn't rush to say yes. He chooses slowly, wisely. That's why women obsess over the one who doesn't move fast. Not because he's playing games, but because he has options. And options create magnetism. But here's the twist. You don't need 10 women. You need 10 layers of self-worth. Because when your value is internalized, external scarcity happens naturally. You stop oversharing. You stop chasing. You stop performing. And you start attracting. Not everyone, but the right ones.
Here's a practical way to build this energy: the mirror test. Every day, look at yourself and ask, would I pursue me? Not based on your bank account, not your looks, but your presence, your discipline, your clarity, your emotional control. If the answer is no, fix it. Not for her, for you. Because women don't follow looks. They follow gravity. And gravity comes from a man who has turned his wounds into wisdom, his distractions into focus, and his silence into signal. The next strategy is what I call mystery with integrity. Not withholding to manipulate, but choosing not to be fully read. Women don't want full disclosure in 5 minutes. They want discovery, unfolding, layers. That means being selective with what you share. That means telling stories that lead her deeper, not into your trauma, but into your mind. The best seducers in history, from Cleopatra to Casanova, didn't reveal everything. They gave glimpses. They sparked imagination. And that's what kept their presence lingering in others long after the conversation ended. Mystery is not about secrets. It's about spacing, timing. The man who is constantly available, emotionally exposed, always texting, calling, explaining, he kills desire with familiarity. Desire needs distance. Polarity. Shadow. You don't become seductive by being transparent. You become seductive by being curated. Now here's the contradiction that burns your logic to the ground. The less you chase, the more you're chased. Not because you're manipulating, but because scarcity creates value. Imagine this. You walk into a luxury store. The clerk doesn't run up to you, doesn't beg you to try something on. They wait. You feel their calm presence, their confidence. That stillness makes you curious. You feel you need to prove you belong there. Now compare that to a pushy street vendor begging you to buy. Who holds the power? You didn't lose her because you were too nice. You lost her because you were common, abundant, predictable, like a street vendor selling roses in bulk, sweet, generous, but forgettable. There's a brutal truth that most men will never accept. The more you chase a woman, the more you signal that you are beneath her. Not equal, beneath. And in the psychological language of attraction, that's the kiss of death.